Tonight's journey is not just a story. It's a test of how long your mind can survive the Arctic night. Before we step into this frozen world, make sure to like the video, subscribe to Doe's Dynasty, and drop a comment so this adventure reaches more night travelers like you. Hi guys. Tonight we drift back into a world where winter does not politely knock, but barges in with icy elbows, where you feel the cold settle into your bones the moment you step outside. You stand at the edge of a muddy medieval village. The daylight already fading even though it is barely late afternoon, and you sense that the first harsh breath of winter is sliding across the fields. Your breath hangs in the air like a fragile ghost, and you probably will not survive. This if you show up dressed like a modern tourist with a hoodie and optimism. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And because it is my favorite ritual, tell me where you are watching from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights. You begin to trudge along the narrow path between cottages, your boots sinking slightly into cold, stiffening earth. The village smells of woodsome smoke and damp straw. Someone is chopping logs nearby, the steady thunk of the axe echoing between wall walls. Winter is not fully here yet, but everyone can feel it approaching, the way a farmer senses a storm long before clouds gather. A mainstream historical fact rises naturally as you look around. In Northern Europe during the Middle Ages, peasants spent autumn frantically preparing for winter, because failure to do so meant real danger, not just a chilly inconvenience. You feel that truth pressing into you now. Women bend over baskets piling in the last of the carrots and turnips. A man leads two shaggy goats toward shelter, their hooves clicking over frozen ruts. Children carry bundles of brushwood almost as big as their bodies. You cannot help noticing how early darkness falls. This was normal in their world. Oil for lamps was precious, candles even more so. Light, real light, was a luxury. You pause as a sudden gust of wind rushes past, sending a spray of leaves tumbling across the path. It feels like a warning. This is the moment villagers mentally shift into winter mode. Food must be stored. The roof must be checked for thatch slipping out of place. Loose boards need to be hammered down. Every tiny gap becomes a draft, waiting to torment sleepless nights. Quirky tidbit slips into your awareness as you watch a woman stuffing moss between the beams of her cottage. Moss and mud surprisingly sometimes made better insulation than rags, especially when the rags were needed for patching clothes. The smell of damp moss lingers sweet and earthy. You wonder how many layers of it lie hidden inside these walls, quietly holding back the cold like a secret ally. You turn and glance at the open fields. The soil is already hardening into a surface that looks deceptively smooth under the pale sky. A few strips of land hold the last stubborn cabbages clinging to life. You sense how precarious everything becomes once the ground freezes. Food does not grow. You do not get a second chance. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were more fearful of the cold itself or of the hunger that almost always accompanied it. As you watch the families rush to secure what little they have, you feel that both fears whisper through the air at once. You walk closer to a house where a man is testing the strength of wooden shutters. They close inward with a dull thud, shutting out more than wind. They shut out the long winter nights that stretch for hours beyond what you are used to. Nights when even the bravest among them feel the press of darkness. The long silence punctuated only by crackling fires and restless animals shifting in their stalls. Someone calls out to you, motioning toward a stack of split firewood. You pick up a piece. The bark flakes slightly under your fingers, rough and dry. Wood like this is not just fuel, it is survival itself. Without enough wood, families freeze. With too much green wood, they choke on smoke. Everything is a delicate balance. In a world without convenience stores or thermostats, the crows overhead seem to sense the mood. They circle once, then settle along the ridge of a barn, ruffling their feathers. Their calls sound sharper now, as if the cold has changed their voices too. As you continue down the lane, you brush against a wall of woven branches coated with a thin crust of early frost. You feel its bite even through gloves. The air smells faintly metallic. Winter carries that scent like its signature. People greet each other briskly, not stopping for long chats. There is too much to do. A woman hurries past carrying a pot of lard that will be used to waterproof boots and maybe soothe cracked skin. A boy runs after her with a handful of dried herbs that will freshen the air in the house once the doors stay shut for days at a time. You imagine the cramped, smoky interior, cozy in theory, suffocating in practice. A pig squeals from a small pen as someone tries to coax it inside for the night. Animals share warmth, but animals also stink. This is the trade-off peasants know all too well. You watch as the creature finally plots inside. Its breath steaming like a dragon, pretending to be harmless. You step closer to a storage hut where a young couple is stacking sacks of grain. Their movements are slow and deliberate. They count each sack, tighten each rope. You can see the tension in their shoulders. One mistake now could cost them dearly. In February, the cold does not kill quickly. It wears you down. Day after day, a dog trots by, its fur thick and bristling. It gives you a quick glance before detouring toward a warm spot near a cottage door. Even animals know where heat leaks out. The sky darkens further, yet it is not quite night. This strange half-life feels ancient, as though your body instinctively knows it should already be indoors with a cloak wrapped tight and a bowl of something, hot in hand. But you keep wandering, feeling the cold settle deeper into your clothing. You notice smoke rising from nearly every chimney now. That smoky haze drifts low, clinging to rooftops. It smells comforting and abrasive at the same time. A medieval winter always smells like this. Smoke is unavoidable. People live inside it. In one doorway, two villagers are discussing something softly. You cannot hear much. Just a few words about a neighbor who is late bringing in his wheat. Their expressions shift between concern and judgment. Winter has a way of making everyone watch one another closely. A single unprepared household could become a desperate household by January. As you approach the edge of the village again, you feel how the air outside the cluster of homes is colder, heavier, almost solemn. Out here, winter reigns. In there, humans push back with fires, shared labor, and rough woven blankets. You pause for a long moment, absorbing it. The looming season forces everyone to think ahead. Winter strips away illusions. You cannot pretend things are fine if the roof leaks or the grain is low. You cannot bluff your way through months of freezing temperatures and long nights. And maybe that stark honesty is part of what kept medieval communities tightly bound. You take one slow breath. The cold stings, but the village glows like a cluster of ember hearts, keeping the darkness at bay. You are ready to step closer to see what else must be done before the true winter arrives. You move toward the nearest cottage now, letting your fingers glide over the rough well wall. As you approach the doorway, the timber feels cold, almost damp, and you sense how much work stands between this structure and a bearable winter night. Every peasant in this village knows the truth. Truth you are about to see with your own eyes. A house in the Middle Ages does not protect you by default. You must constantly coax it into cooperating. One mainstream historical fact comes to mind as you look at the sagging thatch roof above you. Most medieval peasants lived in simple timber-framed houses filled with whey and daub, a mix of clay, straw, and dung that created a surprisingly sturdy surface, but required frequent repairs to survive harsh winters. You feel those repairs waiting in every crack. You push the door slightly and step inside, letting the dimness swallow you. The air is still, smelling faintly of old smoke and damp straw. The interior walls look like a patchwork quilt made from whatever materials the family could scavenge. Someone has spent the last few days stuffing handfuls of straw, moss, hair, and anything resembling insulation into gaps where the wind sneaks through. A quirky tidbit emerges as you brush your hand across a newly patched seam. You look upward and notice bundles of herbs hanging from the ceiling beams. Some are meant for cooking, some for sickness, and some simply because the family believes they repel cold spirits. Superstition mingles easily with practicality in this time. Nothing is wasted, not even beliefs. You continue walking around the single room, noting how every object doubles as insulation. Spare clothes hang along the walls, not just to dry, but to block drafts. Animal hides line the sleeping area to trap warmth. Even baskets are stacked strategically to fill empty space where cold might gather. You reach the door again and notice the heavy wooden latch. It is wrapped in cloth to keep it from freezing and sticking. The woman of the house steps in from outside carrying a bundle of sheep wool. Without speaking, she kneels near the wall and begins tucking wisps of wool into a narrow slit along the floor. She works quickly, her fingers red and rough. Wool is a precious resource, but a small amount spent now can save aching bones later. The smell of cooked barley still lingers in the air. The family likely ate earlier, not because they were hungry, but because the meal helps warm the house. Heat rises from boiling pots and lingers long after the food is gone. You feel the faint warmth still clinging to the hearthstones. A chill drifts through the room as another gust rattles the shutters. You watch how everyone glances toward the sound, instinctively checking whether the wood holds. Winter has a way of making people listen to their homes like living creatures. You listen too. The house cacks in size. It is adjusting to the cold just as the people are. You step outside again to examine the exterior. The thatch forms thick layers above your head, nearly a foot deep in some spots. A well-maintained roof is both the pride and the survival of the household. Thatch naturally repels water. And when arranged correctly, it can insulate astonishingly well, but it also attracts birds, insects, and sometimes rodents. You see a few stones placed across the ridge to secure it from storms. Walking around the cottage, you see more signs of preparation. A pile of clay near the wall suggests someone has been repairing darb throughout autumn. Wooden boards lean against the lower wall, awaiting placement if the wind grows fierce. A tangle of brushwood is stacked nearby to add as emergency windbreaks. It all feels fragile yet strangely resilient. You realize medieval houses survive the same way medieval people do. Not by perfection, but by constant adjustment. You take a deep breath. The cold nips at your face, but the cottage behind you stands firm, sturdy in its patched-together way. Inside it, the family has done what they can. The rest will be up to luck, weather, and the quiet endurance that defines peasant life. Winter is coming fast, and now you understand just how much preparation these simple shelters require to stand even a fighting chance against the season you are stepping toward. You step back inside the cottage, letting the door settle behind you with a gentle thump, and your eyes drift immediately toward the single most important feature of any medieval home in winter, the hearth. It stands in the center of the room like a patient animal. Dark for the moment, though the stones still hold a whisper of heat. You feel it on your shins before you even get close. This small smoky heart is what keeps the entire household alive. One mainstream historical fact settles naturally into your awareness as you watch the woman place kindling on the embers. In medieval Europe, the hearth was not just a cooking place, but the primary heat source, and households often kept a fire going for weeks without letting it fully extinguish. You can sense why starting a fire each morning in brutal cold is not convenient, and losing the flame entirely could cost precious time and fuel. You crouch near the hearth, feeling the stones radiate warmth. They are rough to the touch, mottled from years of use, built from whatever the family could gather from nearby fields or rivereds. There is something almost sacred about this spot. Families slept close to it, cooked every meal over it, dried their clothes beside it, and sometimes even warmed newborns in its glow. The faint crackle beneath the ashes tells you the fire is drowsy, waiting for breath. A quirky tidbit surfaces as you study the hearth more closely. Some peasants believed that letting the fire die completely invited misfortune, even evil spirits that loved cold corners and dark rooms. Because of that, families might keep a single coal wrapped in ash or placed in a small clay pot overnight. Whether or not the superstition mattered, the practice worked. A tiny ember could make morning kindling flare quickly, saving both time and freezing fingers. You watch the woman lift a small bundle of twigs and dried leaves. She leans close, blows softly, and the ember glows brighter. A thin thread of smoke curls upward, searching for a way out. The hearth sits on an open floor without a chimney in the modern sense. Instead, smoke escapes through a small vent or simply drifts upward to the thatch, where it seeps out slowly. This is why medieval homes so often smell smoky. It is a smell that clings to clothing, hair, food, everything. You breathe in the scent and feel it settle inside your throat like a low hum. Historians still question how comfortable these smoky interiors truly were. Some argue that the constant haze must have been unbearable, while others insist that people became accustomed to it, even appreciating how smoke-preserved meat hung from the rafters and helped deter insects. As you blink through the faint mist gathering overhead, you suspect that medieval lungs probably suffered more than anyone admitted, but the benefits of smoke made the discomfort worth tolerating. The fire starts to wake up. Small flames lick upward, orange and lively. The heat reaches your hands and feels instantly comforting, like sinking into a warm bath. You stretch your fingers toward it, aware that people in this time often rotated. Chores around the hearth simply to soak up. Moments of warmth, mending clothes, sorting beans, brushing wool, soothing a child. Everything feels easier beside the fire. The boy you saw earlier enters with a small armful of logs. He stacks them neatly next to the hearth. Wood is precious and the family burns it sparingly. First, the weakest flames get twigs and stick ends, then thin branches, then logs only after the fire declares itself strong enough. If you burn through wood too fast, you end the winter shivering. If you burn too little, you freeze anyway. This is the balance every household must learn. You look up toward the roof. Dark smoke stains mark decades of rising soot. Some thatched houses had open smoke holes, others did not, relying instead on the slow leaking of haze through walls and gaps. Smoke drifts upward in lazy ribbons, painting the air with gray slopes. It curls around herbs tied to beams, dries out hides hung there, and leaves everything tinted with a dull, dusky shadow. The woman sets a small pot on the stones, letting it warm gradually. You can guess its contents just by the smell. Onions, barley, maybe a little fat skimmed from yesterday's stew. The sound of bubbling broth is like a lullaby in this world. A meal cooked over an open flame is both sustenance and warmth, two things inseparable in peasant life. The door opens again and a young girl slips inside, shaking off the cold. She heads straight for the fire without a word, her hands trembling slightly. She sits on a low stool, leaning in until the firelight softens her face. The warmth spreads across her cheeks, turning them pink. You sense just how many winter evenings she will spend exactly like this. The father takes a seat near the hearth too, a long-handled tool in hand. He pokes the fire, adjusting the burning logs with practiced ease. Sparks jump, tiny bright insects darting upward before fading into the air. You watch them dance and vanish. The fire hisses softly, still half asleep. You glance at the walls where several clay pots rest in niches near the hearth. Their contents vary: salt, herbs rendered fat, and sometimes water that must never be allowed to freeze. Even a thin sheen of ice can shatter a fragile clay vessel.